Hello, folks, and welcome to this episode of Black Beat Podcast. My name is John Washington, and I'm the editor-in-chief of Flossin Media, and I'm here as your host for this series of the podcast, where we take an unapologetically black approach to the topics and issues impacting our community. For the next several episodes, we will be launching into issues surrounding environmental justice as a part of a campaign we call Earth Needs Allies. Kicking off this series, we welcome Sam Baraso, who heads up Portland Clean Energy Community Benefit Fund. He leads a team in charge of designing, developing, and implementing Measure 26201, a tax bill approved by 65% of Portland voters in 2018. The tax is connected to business in Portland and makes more than $1 billion in gross revenues nationally and $500,000 in Portland. Sam's broad experience in environmental management, economics, finance, and social equity, coupled with his interest in opportunities revolving around ecosystem services, energy efficiency, renewable energy, and low emissions development strategies, makes him a top-notch Earth ally. And I say so. Boy, that was a mouthful, Sam. I couldn't believe you. Every time I read that, but the question is, damn, Sam, what do you really do? I mean, that sounds like a whole lot of stuff for Earth Needs Allies. Damn, you sound like you driving the bus.
I think I need to edit that. I think I may need to go back and edit that. Okay. Thank you for that, John.
Yeah, no problem, Sam. Welcome today. Sam, tell us a little bit about yourself, man. Who's this guy sitting with us today in this room, man, with all this interesting and exciting background when it comes to just this whole socio-economic, this whole earth consciousness, this whole renewable energy consciousness? How'd you come about that, Sam? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, John. Well, folks, I'm Sam Baraso here and with the Portland Clean Energy Fund. And for me, I came to this because a lot of people saw both something in me and decided to gamble on me and made sure that they invested in my success and helped me find paths when I couldn't find a path. And so, I've been here in Portland for almost 10 years now, but come from, suburbs of Atlanta. And family is from East Africa, originally in Ethiopia. And so for me, the connection to land was never far, but figuring out how to make sure that connection to land was real, was meaningful for me, and how I could support being both an environmentalist, both being someone who can help address and is working in addressing climate change. It's something that was a matter of a lot of people seeing that and making sure that they helped they charted and helped me on my path to success and my path to being here.
Wow. And what an interesting parable, or an associative reality in terms of where you came from. When we think about Earth Needs Allies, and here we is a brother here straight out of Africa, that whole connection to the earth, and it's so fascinating because the first thing you think about when you think about clean energy and all these things, you always think about white folks, folks that, this hippie type that's hugging a tree or whatever, and it's such an irony when we look at it. And I don't mean the stereotype or anything like that, but that's the truth about it. When I go to the hood, I ask somebody, hey, do you know that the earth needs allies? And somebody turns around and says, yeah, I need a couple of dollars too. But there's really some exciting work going on in this endeavor, man. So I'm really fascinated to delve in a little deeper. Also, along with us, we have a little young intern here with us. I don't know how young he is on that part of it, but he does seem like he come along with a little bit of experience. We got Jarrell Scott with us here, sitting on deck with us here today to participate with this interview. A little younger than me, but I think it's important that we have that perspective at the table. But what does PCEF mean for the black community? Tell me a little bit about that, Sam.
PCEF was put on the ballot by a group of people of color, black folks, which was central to that. And it was about making sure that you named it, in Oregon and Portland, we've been known for being incredibly green, incredibly environmentally friendly for a long period of time. Since the 60s, 70s, and so on. And at the same end, a lot of the benefits of being green have not come to black and brown folks like us, but have materialized for well-off households, well-off businesses, and so on. And so PCEF was core to saying that being able to be someone that is benefiting the environment, working to benefit the environment, or just in your own lifestyle, getting to do things that are right by the environment shouldn't be limited to just white folks, or folks that are homeowners, or folks that have a lot of resources. And so PCEF was designed at its core to address that.
Wow.
And so I know we're going to get to talk about all of those things, but it was just at its core, it is that the environment is for all of us. And for so many of us, I mean, you called it earlier, but we've been doing this work for a long time, just not by those words.
Yeah. And it's so amazing too, man, when I think about some of the stuff that I've been hearing out there. It's kind of strange where, everybody around the world is trying to find more land and plant more trees for oxygen, right? But the bottom line is they ain't enough land to plant the amount of trees that they need to be able to give the amount of oxygen to the amount of people we got. So, and of course, black folks is always at the lower part of the rung on the ladder, so we usually are receiving or being recipients of some unhealthy, objectives. And for me, it's really important that we do take the time to get more involved in this type of life-changing reality because, I used to have another young person that used to come around the program and they used to talk a little bit about every time something hit them in the solar plex, they say, uh-oh, life change, And this is one of them life change moments, man, when you think about it, I mean, where we're heading and the possibilities, I mean, here in Oregon, when we think about it, I don't have air conditioning in my house. It's kind of interesting. I had a big old outline, but I do have a pool in the middle of the house, right? And so, it used to be that, well, that was cool, I mean, the fact is, a couple of hot days, really 100-degree weathers in the summer, it'd be no problem. I'd go out and jump in the pool, get back, and everything be cool, right? But, I've been jumping in that pool more this last couple of summers than I care to walk to, We have more hot days than before. Do you notice that, Sam, or you recognize that?
I mean, John, it's a reality that's here for us to stay, and I know folks think that it's a fluke. It's not. It's going to continue to happen. We're going to have more of these events, and no, I mean, it's something that in many ways is unfortunate that it takes having those events to feel this for people to start, waking up. But the reality is, those days are here, and they're here to stay.
Wow.
And it's up to us collectively to do something if we want to make sure that it doesn't get worse.
So that collective reality is connected to where this money comes from, right? So this money comes from businesses in the state of Oregon, right? So how are these businesses feeling about the ones who have to pay these taxes in this situation? How do they feel about the work that PCEF is doing?
Well, I'll say this. I don't like to pay taxes, but I know that my taxes go towards a lot of things that are good and well. And so, well, yes, these are billion-dollar corporations that make at least $500,000 locally that are paying the surcharge on a range of on their sales. And so I can't say, I don't know what they're thinking about it, but I'd like to believe that as they're starting to see these projects happening, knowing that this is members of the communities that are shopping in their stores, that are getting these solar panels, that are getting to work on these greener jobs, that are getting these higher wages, that it turns back around. That's a boomerang that comes back around and means that folks have more money then. And when I talk about folks, I'm talking about black and brown folks, low-income folks having more money to spend in those same shops. And so I hope people see that for what that is, but that's not for me to say.
That's just where it is. I mean, if we all got to invest in some kind of sense of responsibility to make this change or to transition. Terrell, you want to jump in here at any point that we see as we move through it, or you want to chill for a second? That's something that presents itself. You'd be more than delighted to step in whenever you like to. Okay. So obviously this is a heavy lift. It's a first-time situation where we're just. And how did this come to be, though? By the way, I mean, what brought this conversation to businesses and taxes and all this concerning this? How did this come to be?
I think we're in an interesting time where, in the U.S. we've been expecting at a national level for climate action to happen for a long time. I mean, this whole Inflation Reduction Act, it is a terrible name, But we finally just recently took action at the federal level. And so up until that, it's always been up to states, up to local cities, and up to local communities to make this happen. In this instance, this is about ingenuity and innovation in the Black community and brown communities to see that this is something that we shouldn't be left out of, and we need to be, if we're gonna do this, we all need to be part of this. So, you know, in the same way that I'd say Oregon, Portland has been pioneers in doing other environmental programs. They're finally catching, you know, the state's finally, and it's catching up because Black and brown folks said we've got to do this for ourselves. Right. So I think it's on that and on the heels of all of that that this has come together by a group of community-based organizations saying we need to do this, and in partnership with labor, progressive businesses, other environmental groups. So I don't want to discount that it took a lot of folks to make this happen, and it's happening.
Wow. So Sam, tell us, what are some of the harder issues to tackle within the environmental justice movement? I mean, obviously, man, this thing has been going on a little bit. I'm sure it's been monopolized by quote unquote white America, and then for us to becoming more involved in it. I mean, what are some of the obstacles and barriers you're experiencing in this process so far?
I mean, I think I would just, the bear in the room, and it's obvious, and folks have been yelling about this for years and years, but if we're investing in, we've invested in white communities, white homeowners more broadly for 30, 40 some odd years, and whether it's tax credits, whether it's the residential energy tax credit, or whether it's just the property tax reductions and other things that folks get. And so there is a long history of making investments for many, many years in all these other communities. And that means that, and we've got to be making those same investments in Black and brown communities, and that takes years. And so that's, and when I talk about those investments, I say it broadly, but what I mean is, the same organizations that are working on behalf and working for the Black and brown folks, their capacity's got to be built up. They've got to have that same experience in going in their communities and saying, we want this too, we're going to build this, we're going to put these on the roofs, we're going to make our homes nicer. So that capacity has to be built up, and it doesn't happen overnight. That takes years and years, and it's intentionality in doing so. So that's.
So you're doing systems change. Thinking change. So what are some of the pillars, Sam? I mean, where would you begin in something like this as large as what? I mean, because it's like any direction we as Black people in our communities of BIPOC or whatever, any direction you look, there's work to be made in terms of race relationships and socio-economic realities and issues. I mean, how do you begin such a large undertaking? I mean, it sounds like the rest of the world, the United States should be right on your heels, figuring out how to navigate right along with you, right?
And they are. And I would say, and there's many national outfits across the U.S. that are checking in and saying, hey, how do we do this too? And so I think as a local community, it is about saying, we support this. We know we're not going to get it right tomorrow. Mm-hmm. We know that there's going to be risks. And I think the hardest part of all of this is that it's also Black and brown folks that are not afforded the opportunity to take risk to fail, because that gets made, and yet we give, I can't tell you how often we give other groups opportunities and chances to fail over and over and over again, and we call that success.
Yeah.
But we don't do the same for Black and brown folks.
Yeah, that's critical for us to fail at anything. In the trench of it, because it seems like we seem to carry a burden. When we fail, we go out of the game. But then most of the time, there are also those opportunities that we should have. Sure thing. What are you doing, taking a break?
Giving you more power.
Jarrell, you see an opening anywhere?
Just thinking about asking about just with local communities and how gentrification in North and Northeast Portland has kind of affected Portland wanting to enact on climate change and environmental justice.
That's it. Know that one. It'd be good. I'll segue you in.
All right.
Onto that, yeah.
Okay, that's good.
So so that sounds like that's a heck of a really a heavy lift. But it seems like the resources are there. And it seems like there's an initial effort to, but I guess I'm really curious as to where do you start? I mean, do you start in Maslow? Do you start, some other deviant or some offshoot strategy to get us there? I mean, or just hunt and peck, try something and if it don't work, try something else. Do you got a strategy?
Yeah. I think, John, there's a little bit of we've got a framework here where we're working with a range of organizations that have been at this and pushing them to make partnerships and to partner, and at the same end working with smaller groups to help them move into the space. So it's a little bit of working with the existing groups that are working in the climate action, in the clean energy, in the regenerative ag space, pushing them to bring in more Black and brown folks, both in their leadership ranks, both in working on those projects in service to the community, but also lifting up and working with new organizations. So it's a little bit of both. And it's something we're going to continue to figure out, adjust, and make fixes as we go along.
Right on, man. I appreciate this. And Jarrell, I see that you look like you leaning into this one. What's going on with you, man? Talk to us a little bit.
All right. Well, first I want to introduce myself. I'm Jarrell Scott, intern for Flossin Media, doing marketing. And I had a question about Portland's gone through like gentrification, so I just wanted to hear your input about, like, has that, with Portland being gentrified, especially in northeast Portland, has that been a factor in Portland trying to take more action into environmental justice and climate and stopping climate change?
Without a doubt. And I think this is one of the hardest parts of the program, is the fact that we have these boundaries, which are artificial, but they're there, and they're both artificial, but they're real at the same time. And so one of the hardest things is the fact that as folks are no longer in Northeast Portland, but moving out to the numbers, out to Gresham and beyond, that it limits our ability to do work. And so certainly we're seeing more and more work happening in the numbers within the city, and that's definitely a good thing. And we're trying to, we try to do the work to help stabilize and invest in people's homes so they can stay in there and retire in peace and comfort and age in place. But there are limitations, and the fact that gentrification has been all too real is one of those. So, it's been something that's absolutely affected the program.
But and yes and no, and most people might want to attest that, there was 60,000 Black people here living some 15 years ago or less. And I still do believe that there's still a lot more Black people here. I mean, there's, from that 60,000, then we down to 30,000. But I think that for the most part, I think it's the whole idea of us being passive recipients of somebody else's dictation. And I think that really sort of gets me a little bit riled up, because the question is, what could we take an initiative to take on, even in the light of change, earth change? I mean, there's some real simplistic realities that we understand. I mean, if we can't heat our house, and then we look at homelessness, you look at all of these things. And so, for me, the socioeconomic aspects of that injustice, this sort of opens up a little bit more of that. But then, as I've always said, Black folks is always too late to come, always late coming to the party, right? Somehow or another, they let us in the gate on these exciting opportunities. But this one, I see that we got a little bit of front end edge on moving towards some of the strategic objectives, and to be able to utilize some of these resources to jump on some of those pre-existing issues that we have that are, like I said, Black Lives Matter just revealed some of our issues. But the bottom line, these issues have never gone anywhere. They've been around for a little while. We've all tried to bring them to light. But I think that this part of it, it's almost like some of the other movements out there. It's kind of strange, because when you think about it, like, there are organizations out there, right? We were down to track and field on the nationals, on the world track and fields down in Eugene, right, down at the O. And one of the things that I saw that was kind of interesting down there was that there were all these other programs down there that would talk, that their platform was to go in and talk a little bit about sports, right? but to talk about sports because they believe everyone, no matter what color, race you are, you're able to sit down and talk about sports, right? But they use that to segue into talking about a little bit more of these complicated issues, you know? And I thought that was ingenious to a degree because I think that it's kind of interesting that there are certain things we can talk about, but when it comes to race and all that other stuff, we have a difficulty amongst ourselves talking, not just amongst blacks, but amongst all the different races and cultures around. We find it difficult to talk about some of the issues that plague us that would support us all about moving along. So Sam, who's doing the work in our community to be able to start, you know, to look at what the black community is doing? Who's doing that work in the black community?
You know, that's the beautiful thing. And John, I just want to appreciate what you said. We're still here, and so gentrification is real, but there's a reality that there's a bunch of us still here. And so there's amazing work, and I will apologize in advance for missing some of the groups, but you know, we've got beautiful work happening with groups like the African American Alliance for Home Ownership and their Power to the People campaign and program. So that is worth checking out for folks. We've got, and they've just been, I mean, they've been one of the groups that have been distributing these portable heat pump cooling units to households, and that has been a lifesaver for those that have received it. So they're making that change happen. We've got groups like the Black Food Sovereignty Coalition and groups which are about making sure that, you know, black folks are connected to the earth, the soil, growing food and reconnecting that way, much in the same way that folks have been doing for a long time in their backyards. Mm-hmm. And so we've got groups like certainly the Portland Community Reinvestments Initiatives working on their housing stock and making sure that housing stock is more efficient, more healthy for folks to live in, but making these big investments. I mean, in terms of you know, adding insulation to their homes, updating their heating systems, all of that, so that these are healthy homes to live in where their energy bills are not obscene. And so we've got, Constructing Hope, working on training folks, getting them ready for apprenticeships, and making sure that they're fully aware of and understanding what these green trades look like.
Right.
Or these trades where you get to work on green projects looks like. So I know I'm missing some, but I just want to name that we've you know, our first cohort of projects, couple cohorts of projects are amazing, and we've got great work happening within the black community. And we're hoping to grow that and see more folks come in.
That's interesting, Sam. I mean, because as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking about how does this conversation, which seems to be a conversation that all races can come in the room and talk about, right? The earth needs allies, right? And we got that in common. But do you think that this could be a segue also to being able to somehow enhance race relations in this country? I mean, after all, we all have to live on the same piece of dirt, you know? And, you know, so is there any kind of other trend, you know, intersections? Because this one seems to be one that everyone can talk about, and everyone is going to be affected by it. And we seem to be able to sit down and talk about the fact that, well, at least on the left, they don't want to talk about it a little bit. I mean, you know, them other folks, and the other ones, you got liberals, and then you got all these other people that are open and willing. But it would seem like this would be a great opportunity, because it just segues into my next question. You know, what are some of the consequences in your mind of not doing this work, man? I mean, how do you think that's going to impact us if we don't get down to business in our community? What do you think that's going to look like, Sam?
I mean, John, I'm not here to be ugly about it, but it's going to be ugly. I mean, that's just the thing. I mean, climate change is very real, and I think there's no denying that. And at the same end, you know, black people can't be left out any longer. That just isn't going to work. So I don't want to picture the world where we get to extreme, you know, more climate extremes, and then we got people that don't have basic means to stay cool, to have clean air, clean water, to some of these basic things that will be ravaged. And I think it's an imperative that we both are working on addressing climate change, as well, and doing so in a way that actually is centering black and brown folks, low income folks, because you can't say we've got everyone. You can't say we've got a clean, an earth that's functioning like it's meant to function without everyone on board.
Yeah, and and I'd agree with you on that, Sam, but at the same time, what do you say to them fools out there that talk about, well, we've been black folk, we've been out here in this sun for all our lives, we can stand this 100-degree heat. And then the ones back there in Chicago talk about, well, snow, that ain't nothing, man, we get 9 feet of snow, we can walk through this to do this. But it's after a while, man, we got to stop acting like as if we ain't conscious about some of the truth about some of the things going on, and then we need to stop reinforcing that ignorant ass thinking amongst ourselves, because I think the bottom line still remains is that if we ain't waking up to the truth about our condition, there's not going to be a way for us to improve upon it. So Sam, tell us how does the average citizen get involved in this conversation? Because after all, like I started out, whenever we start having these kinds of conversations, I don't know about you, but all my partners and the people in my community tell me, oh, you mean tell me about that stuff that them white folks is doing? But when the bottom line is, boy, you better get your consciousness together because it's something you need to be doing too. Or, tell us, how does the average citizen get involved with this kind of thing?
It is, first it's just start connecting with some of the groups that are already doing this and learn about your groups and groups that you all are connected to here, Soul Business District and so many other places. So one is just just get connected in your community because we're connected in the community.
Right, get connected in your community.
Yeah, mm-hmm. so that's just one. And there is I've got to check back, I forget what the group is called, but there was like a EV Noir group, like a black EV owners group. There's all these different groups that are coming up that are about doing this, and so I'd say it's just a little bit of open your eyes, reach out, get connected as you're, whether it's when you're thinking about the next project you're going to do on your home or the next car you're going to buy. Take a step back and see what some of the local groups around you are doing, because there's beautiful work happening in the community, and you're going to have someone that looks like you, that talks like you, is going to come up and show you what it means.
Yeah, man. And y'all are all ride conscious. I know that. I know y'all all like them old Nikes, but maybe Nike might come out with an organic shoe or something, Somebody might make that suggestion, And the other part of it is, look here, y'all. The bottom line is that ain't nobody coming to save you. Don't nobody care if you're doing well or not when it comes to the collective part of that. So somewhere along the line, we need to seriously take some responsibility for our growth and advancement in our communities. Now, rather if it's technology, rather if it's green energy, whatever it may be, we must become very conscious about being available to the growth and changes of our society and our conditions. And then we must always consider coming to the table with the notion of what contribution we can make to the betterment and improvement of our society, our community, our families, and ourselves. So it's really important for us to really pay attention to a lot of these podcasts that we're going to continue to promote and produce. I just can't help but, to go on about this whole issue is about these brothers and sisters in Africa, how they've lived for years on some barren land or whatever. And even you go to Vietnam, where they're planting rice. All of these things and these conditions, we as the people depend upon the earth in order for our survival. Even as far as what's going on over there in Hawaii right now, looking at it, fish self-sufficiency. When you got an island like that imports almost 80% of its goods, but yet there was a point in time when those people lived on that island and they took care of themselves, they was able to feed each other, be able to live and survive on that island without import at all. So it's kind of fascinating to see where we're going with all this. But at the same time, we got big continents like Africa or China and all these people and things that are also big consumers, and big waste distributors. So I think it's a paradoxical situation of where we are right now, but I think the consciousness of us as people in our communities really, really make the difference in this. And as always, black folks, when we get involved, we truly make a difference. So I truly suggest we continue to support one another and educating one another, our families, our children, and moving along these lines of Earth needs allies. And who better player and bigger player than us to become a part of this team. So Sam, I do appreciate you coming to hang out with us again today. And Jarrell, I do appreciate you asking some of the hard questions that is needed, because we do want these young people to continue to stimulate their minds in relationship to the these social ecosystems that are really plaguing us in a way that I think our survival depends upon us participating with. So again, thank you all for participating with us today, and we out of here.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
To take. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, John.
Yeah.
Join the Seoul District Business Association for our 11th annual MLK Dream Run weekend celebration coming September 17th and 18th to Northeast Portland. This two-day event features live music, the Soulful Vendor Village, raffle prizes, and the 5, 10, and 15K races. We've also added a free kids race for 9 and under. This year's theme is environmental justice because Earth needs allies. Select winners and participants have a chance to win a round-trip ticket courtesy of Alaska Airlines. Visit our website for more information and register today, mlkdreamrun.org.